I like to make beef bone broth because not only is it super nutritious and easy to use, it's really easy to make. And it makes use of every single part of the beef, which is great because I don't want to waste any of it. My brother raises cattle, so we regularly get either a half of a beef or a full beef from him. And when we get it from the butcher, we make sure that we ask for the soup bones because the soup bones are so great, not only for making the beef broth, but also for the dogs. Particularly after they've gone through and been turned into broth, they're nice and soft, and so the dogs can get all of the benefit out of the bone. When making the broth, I really like to use a roasting pan, although you could do this in a crock pot, even on the stove or in the oven in just an oven roasting pan. But this is kind of my preference here. I'll just use the bones to put a layer on the bottom. With one this size, I would probably do 3 or 4 bones that size in the bottom. And then I cover it with water, actually pretty deep because I'm gonna allow this to simmer for quite a while. For this one, I fill it all the way up to the top, and this will hold 5 gallons of water, so that's quite a bit. And then it cooks down over time, so I continue to add water. Whatever way that you choose to cook your broth, the important thing is to have it at a low temperature, generally speaking, about 250 degrees. I would usually do it at least 24 hours, more often 48 hours. This has actually been going for 3 days now. So everything that could be extracted from that bone is. The longer that you go, the more potent your beef broth is. Now that it's cooked down for multiple days and it's the potency that I want it, I have to separate out the fat. There's 2 different ways to get the fat off of the broth. One, you can completely cool it down and then just take that solid fat off of the top and then bring it back to a boil. I don't always want to do that because it makes the process just a little bit longer. So for me, I'll just skim the liquid fat off. I'll put all the fat into my pan because I'll purify it down and make a really nice tallow out of it. That tallow I can use either for making soap or for frying stuff like French fries. Tallow makes fabulous French fries. So the way I get it off is I just skim it out. So I'll use my big ladle and press down and just allow the fat to come in. There may be some little chunks of meat or more solid items, which is fine. I just don't want the broth because when I purify the tallow, I'll be able to get all of that out. The lovely thing about fat is that it floats on the surface. So with it floating on the surface, if I do a really shallow skim, then I know everything I'm getting is the fat. The downside of this method is that it won't get out 100% of the fat. So there will be just a little level on the top of that broth there, but a tiny little bit is fine with me. If you don't want that, then use the method where you cool it down and then you can take it off as a solid chunk. For the next step, I remove out as many of the solid chunks as I can. I want to get out all of the big bones and big sections of fat or even meat that have cooked well. And like I said, I'll take that right to my dogs. Now, as I pull these out, I just let them drain for a little bit because I don't want to waste any of that broth. Although the dogs would appreciate that too, I'm sure. As I'm putting it into my jars, I actually have a little filter that goes on top of my funnel. And this is great because it'll pull any of the little chunks out of the broth so that the broth will be nice and clear. I'll be using quart-sized jars and going up to 1 inch of headspace. Headspace is the space from the top of the food to the top of the jar. Sometimes if I have a jar that I notice has a lot of fat on the top, I'll just use a little gravy ladle and pull it off. Anytime that I'm canning something that has a little more fat content to it, pretty much anything with meat, I like to wash off the rims, not just with water, but actually with vinegar. I feel like it cuts the fat a little bit better, so that if there's any grease that's stuck on that rim, that it won't interfere with the seal. I'll then place on the lids and rings until they're fingertip tight. To prepare the pressure canner, I'll put in 3 quarts of hot water. I'll then load it in my pressure canner and can it at 10 pounds of pressure for 25 minutes if I'm at sea level. I'm at 1,200 feet, so I'll do it at 11 pounds of pressure. And then I lock on the lid. Now that steam is beginning to vent, I'll set my timer for 10 minutes. Now that the timer's gone off, I'll place my weight over the top of the vent. At this point, the pressure should start to rise. My indicator for pressure has already popped up there, but the dial gauge is still at 0. It will start to go up though, and so at this point I don't want to try to remove the lid at all, not until I'm fully done with the process and everything is back down. Now I'll get it up to pressure, which for me is 11 pounds, and then I will set my timer. After that point, if it drops below that pressure, then I need to completely restart my timer, even if it's right at the end of the cooking process. Now that it's up to 11 pounds of pressure, I'll turn my timer on for 25 minutes. Now that the timer's gone off, I'll turn off the heat and allow the pressure to drop naturally. Now that my dial indicates 0 pounds of pressure and my pressure indicator is down, I'll remove my weight and then I'll remove the lid. I always open it up away from me so that any of the steam won't go into my face. And then I'll let this rest for 10 minutes. I'll then remove my jars and place them on a heat-resistant surface about 1 to 2 inches apart. This is just so that they cool down quicker. And then I'll allow them to rest for 24 hours so that they can get a nice seal. After that, I'll remove the ring, wash off the outside, and place them in a cool, dry, dark location like my pantry and use them in the next 1 to 3 years.